Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is James Nightingale. If you haven't seen this channel before, I've effectively been on placement for the past 12 months, and today is actually my very last day on factory site. So it's a lot of sort of sadness for leaving, but also excitement to sort of be able to finish and go back to university. So I'm on site for the last time today, so I thought this would be a good time to just sort of intro this video of the 12 lessons that I have learnt from 12 months on placement. So I really hope you find this really useful. Stick around if you want to find out more about that. As I said, it might be a bit more of a waffle, but hopefully there'll be a lot of good stuff in there as well. So the first sort of thing that I learnt from this past 12 months is communication is absolutely key. It's everything really, particularly for my role as a project manager, but in general in work it's so important because it's kind of the difference between a good project and a bad project. Is the difference between good working relationships and bad working relationships, which affects so many things. So for me, when I started the year, I thought that communication was my biggest strength, and it probably was, but I felt that meant I had nothing really to learn about it, but it turns out I had a lot to learn about it. And actually through leading a lot of meetings and progressing in that area, I discovered that there was a lot that I didn't know how to do. One thing that I particularly learned is what my manager calls messaging, which is effectively the overarching message that you're trying to get across to the person you're talking to. The particular character group that I had to learn was the client, so the bigger sort of stakeholders in a project. And I had to learn that actually these guys do not need to know absolutely everything, all the details, because it normally results in them asking loads of questions that are unhelpful to the meeting. But also they don't want to know all the detail. They just want to know the sort of overarching big areas that they need to be able to steer on, because that's what sort of your stakeholders are for, is to keep them updated on the progress and to steer the project how they sort of want it to go. So I really had to learn kind of the hard way. I ended up creating the decks for a client meeting and presenting things over the first couple of months. And I got it wrong quite a lot, but slowly I did manage to progress, and eventually we did have a client meeting where the client at the end was like, that was a dynamic meeting, James, and I've never heard that used before to describe my meeting style, but it was something I learned kind of the hard way. But there's so much more to communication as well, to do with communicating with different types of people. I've had to communicate with these really high-level stakeholders and directors, all the way to communicating with builders who are sort of pouring concrete into the ground and a bit more rough and ready. So that is the first sort of thing that I learned. The second thing that I learned was take a break. I hope you can see that. Taking a break. So I spoke about this in my video about stress. It's particularly important to be reminded of. When you're going through a busy time in your project, that is when it's most important to take breaks. You should really be taking breaks all year round, but particularly when you are more busy, it's okay to take a break. I initially, when we got busy, whenever I'd have a lunch break, I'd probably break for 5 minutes to go grab something from downstairs, and then I'd take it back to my laptop and basically just eat my sandwich whilst answering emails. And part of that was because of this sort of image of feeling like I can't stop working because it will look lazy, but also this element of there's so much to do. I need to do as much as I can. That's totally not true and not helpful. So if there's anything I've learned, it's okay to take a break and really force yourself, if you're struggling with this, to have at least half an hour for lunch. I found that really difficult at the start, but I've kind of got a lot better at it now. And it's really important to find maybe something else to do in that lunch break other than just eating, because I eat very quickly, and so I need to normally find something else to do, which is normally going for a walk, or maybe watching a video, listening to a podcast, doing something different, maybe popping out to the car and even calling family and friends. So it's okay to take a break. The third thing is a bit more practical, and it's spread your holidays out. Now, I've been pretty rubbish at this. I basically took pretty much half of my holiday days just over Christmas, and to the extent where I managed to work it around the bank holidays that I had 3 weeks off in a row, which was great. And there is science behind having a longer period of time off. I think it's 10 days it takes for your body to truly sort of wind down. So any days longer than that, you sort of are super relaxed. However, I've found that actually using all of my holiday in sort of one period of time was a bit destructive to the rest of my time on placement. Now, a lot of conversations I've had with other placement students show that they're not very good at taking holidays either. Now, they did the opposite to me, and that they kind of forgot they had holiday days and just sort of worked for months and months on end, rather than me who just took my holiday at the start. And they quite often get to a point of near burnout, but at least very, very tired. So the tip here is really spread your holidays out. I think there's like a tip where it says, make sure that you know when your next holiday is, and make sure that you have a holiday every 2 months, the most, I think the biggest gap. So because I took that large amount of time over Christmas, I also had a week in like March. It meant I only had like 4 days or something left to take over the whole of summer, and I had a couple of weddings, so it meant I could only take 1 day at a time. So the maximum amount of time I had off over the whole of the summer was 1 extra day. So with a weekend, that was 3 days in total. So I never had a proper summer holiday, which, although it's not been as busy, that's quite difficult. And it particularly was difficult when we were at a really stressful point in the project. I couldn't have time off when my other managers would have a couple of weeks off around those times. So make sure that you spread out your holidays and you know when your next holiday is going to be over a 2-month period. Number 4 is get stuck in. This is something that me and my colleague Ellery, well, my fellow placement student Ellery, and I definitely fully agree on, is that in order to get the most out of your placement, you have got to really get stuck in and say yes to so many different things. For me, this looked like pushing myself a little bit out of my comfort zone. So for example, I was asked to go to Berlin to a fruit and veg expo. Now initially I felt a bit apprehensive. I'm not a big traveller, but I did say yes. And it was actually such a unique and good experience. Really nice to connect with the colleague that I went with. I actually made a video about it, so you can watch that if you want. And it just really pushed me out of my comfort zone and helped me to learn a lot about the industry, but also about sort of saying yes to things and being a bit more confident. So that was one element I said yes to, but another one was just getting stuck in with your company, really. So I said yes to doing, in fact, I proactively asked to join the sustainability team at my company, just because that's something that I'm quite passionate about. By doing that, it's just allowed me to grow a lot more as a professional. And before I started my placement, one big tip that I learned was you will get out what you put in. I think both me and Ellery have found this, that we do get out what we put in. So absolutely get stuck in and say yes to as much as you can. However, do rein it back in when you start to get a bit more established. So that leads me nicely onto my next point, which is learn how to say no. So at the start of your placement or a new job, it is important to get stuck in and say yes to a lot. However, if you don't learn how to say no over that period of time, then you're going to burn out, you're going to get overwhelmed. You need to learn sort of where your limits are. And by saying yes to everything, it's really an opportunity for you to learn what areas you really enjoy and are good at and what areas maybe you're not so good at. And then being able to reassess and say, okay, I need to say no to those things. Saying no is a bit of a superpower that I definitely do not have yet. And it's not just knowing when to say no, but it's knowing how to say no that's quite powerful. And quite often that comes alongside with learning how to prioritize. So if someone asks you to do something, you really need to understand realistically when you'd be able to do that thing. And then feed back to the person, okay, I can do this for you, but it won't be done until this time. And if they say, well, it needs to be done sooner than that, then either they're going to have to find someone else to do it, or you're going to need to sort of give up another task to someone else in order to do it. So learning how to prioritize kind of goes hand in hand with learning how to say no to people. So the 6th point is ask lots of questions. Only way you will learn is by asking an unreasonable amount of questions, or what will seem to you as an unreasonable amount of questions. At the start of your placement, it will probably feel quite uncomfortable and actually frustrating that you know so little. But the only way you're going to learn that stuff is by asking people for help. And what you'll find is as you go through the year, you'll pick up these simple things, and because you've asked all those questions at the start, you'll become so much more competent. And asking questions is such a great way to pick up knowledge quickly. And it actually, if you ever feel like it's inconveniencing your colleagues, think again, because actually often your colleagues will feel really valued that you've asked them for help. Now, on literally my first day of my placement, I was given a task straight away and put on my new project. And the manager asked me to sort of help take charge of the RFIs with one of my colleagues. And I was thinking to myself, what's an RFI? So I did actually ask him, thankfully, and he was like, well done, good question, always good to clarify. And they stand for requests for information, by the way. And just by sort of starting on that foot of, I'm going to ask lots of questions, kind of releases a little bit of a tension for you. Do not be afraid to ask an unbelievable amount of questions, because it will help you to learn so much better. And I think most people in the industry would say that they'd much rather you clarified than try to make it on your own through your own strength and actually not getting anywhere. So the 7th thing I learned was that company culture is incredibly important, and I would almost argue that it's just as important as the role. So obviously the role is the thing that you are applying to. You won't be in the company if the role doesn't suit you, and that's obviously the sort of first thing you need to look at. But I have learned really that company culture is so important as well, and it sort of really becomes just as important as the role once you get going. I'm in such a great company, culture-wise, basically just a sort of big family, and we have loads of great socials. So if that sounds interesting, you can obviously check them out on the website. But company culture is so important, because it really helps to increase your motivation to do your best in the role. If you are feeling valued and supported, it boosts your productivity massively. And so what I'd say is that when you are looking for roles, definitely consider the company culture, and if you can, always try and get in contact with someone who works at that company, just to gain an idea of what that company is like and how much support they'll offer you, because it's so important for enjoying your job. And you kind of don't realise this, but you probably spend more waking hours with your work colleagues than you do with your loved ones at certain periods of time in the year. So it's so important that you get on well with the people you work with. So really do have a think hard about company culture when you're looking for jobs. So the 8th thing is carve out your niche. This is something my parents actually taught me, which is, in order to sort of increase your value within a company and just in life in general, it's really important that you can sort of focus on one thing maybe that you become just a bit better at than other people. Not to just one-up yourself over people, but to find an area that you really enjoy and you're really passionate about, and to sort of get that next level of detail into. So for me, it's been all around this idea of making videos, video creation, like what I'm doing right now. I reached out to my company and just asked them, can I help by making videos at all? And it's a real passion of mine, and I'd really appreciate it if the company would support that. And they were like, absolutely yes. So it's been really great. I've been able to help them make a couple of videos. I think we've got about 10 videos on the go. Anywhere from helping them with recruitment to sort of just fun little social media posts, and sort of carving out a niche where I'm the project manager who also makes videos, I think is really great, because it kind of adds value to me as a person and as a colleague. And I think I see that within my other colleagues. So for example, one of my other colleagues wants to become a sort of automation expert, because that is actually becoming a massive part of the food industry. And by going that next level of detail on automation, he's sort of carving out a niche for himself. And I know that my parents have done this. My dad's done it within, I know, blood pressure clinics. My mum's done it in dermoscopy, which is to do with skin. So carving out a niche within your role, I think, is actually really good, because it increases your value to a company massively. Right. Have fun. Have fun. Life is too short to just go for it mundanely and boringly. Allow yourself to have a bit of fun. As I think I spoke about this in my stress video as well, which I'll put up on the screen. Having fun really helps your stress levels, and it helps your mental well-being, and just so many different things. If you're able to have fun at work, it provides us this other element of relaxation and, again, comfort that then allows you to do your job better. Get the football table out, get the pool out, get the darts out, whatever it is, and make sure that you're not just having work-related conversations with your colleagues. Talk about their life, talk about the things that they enjoy, and then try and figure out what sort of things you have in common. As I said, for me, it's all about being competitive, and most factories I go to have some form of games. In our office, we've got a pool table, So I've lost at that quite a few times. But have fun. It really helps to boost your relationships with your colleagues, but also reduces stress levels and helps you to feel more comfortable within your company and your role. Bro, this is long. Number 10. Work is very different to university. What I find is that whatever sort of situation or life phase that you're in, you tend to notice all of the positives of the other life phase, the one that you're not currently in, because you sort of realise, oh, I didn't realise I had that. So this past year of working, I've sort of seen all the benefits really of working at university and what all the good things are about that. And I'm actually going back to my final year of university, so I do plan on making the most of it. But I just thought I'd go over some of the key differences that I've found between work and university. Work is a lot more structured, whereas university is a lot more flexible. Now that comes with positives and negatives on both sides. Obviously, work being more structured means that you kind of don't have to think about planning as much. You certainly have to have good sort of self-management and time management, but it means that you kind of know that you're working between a certain set of hours and then you can stop. Whereas uni is a lot more flexible, you can work into the weekends, the evenings a lot easier. However, that does mean that university, you have a lot more flexibility with meeting up with your friends, doing things that you really want to do, going to the gym, exercise. I found exercise to be a bit of a challenge to fit in during work this year. So I think university has a real unique flexibility that you don't really get at work in your life as much. So that's something I think really utilise if you are still at university, utilise that flexibility. This is a simple one. Work pays you, uni does not. So yeah, you kind of will notice that when you go on a placement or start work, that you do actually start to get paid, which certainly is helpful. Another one is that work has real life impacts, whereas university is very cushioned. And what you'll realise is that when you say you're going to do something, you need to make sure you follow through with that if you're in work, because it can have real life impacts. It can have money, time impacts on actual people. And so it means that you can have a lot more stress at work because it's so much more real. However, it's a lot more rewarding often when things go well because it has real life impacts. University, I think, is a lot more cushioned. When things go wrong, it's not as big a deal because it's just a mark or whatever. But also it's maybe not as high a peak because it doesn't really have much real life impact. Unless you're doing a really cool project that does impact the real world. There are many other differences between uni and work, but I won't go into all of them now. We're nearly there. Number 11. Work-life balance is a challenge. It is really difficult. So the main conversation I've had with all of my sort of friends and family, particularly people at work as well, has been about work-life balance and how do you find work-life balance? Because it's really challenging. At the start it was a bit more simple because I was at home a lot more and it had a bit of a better balance, but when I started going to the factory and having a lot more driving to do and more stress, work-life balance became a big challenge. And I think it's something that you continue to work out throughout your entire career. But one really interesting conversation I had with someone just this week actually was telling me to stop thinking about it as work-life balance, but instead think about it as work-life rhythm. Because the words work-life balance make it seem like there's always a perfect balance that you should be meeting, and if you're not meeting it, then you're clearly doing something wrong. And that's really unhelpful because it means that you'll start blaming yourself for not managing yourself properly. If you start to think of it as a work-life rhythm, then you can hopefully step back and recognise, okay, what sort of stage in my work am I at right now? What stage of life am I in right now? And what rhythms do I need to build around that? It might be that you do need to put in some extra hours at a certain period of time because of the nature of the project, but then you'll recognise that later on, like I am now, we're coming to the end of a project and it's a lot more sort of slow and a bit more calm, and you recognise that you've got a different work-life rhythm. Now, another key tip with this though is when you do become super busy and stressed, it's really important to not try and solve that by adding more stuff to do or adding things to help that. It's far more effective if you start to remove things away from your life when you're busy, like responsibilities, like commitments, because that will just create a little bit more space, a bit more margin for you to rest and calm down during the stressful times. And the final point, if you're still here, well done, we're nearly there. Final point is there is always more to learn. One value that I've carried out throughout this year, and I hope to carry throughout the rest of my career, is that you are never too old or too experienced to learn something new. As a project manager, you work with such a wide range of people and trades that you will always learn something new. And it's really important to always remain humble and not act like a know-it-all, because that won't really get you anywhere. I find that if you always have the mindset of, today I'm going to learn something new, it's far more rewarding and enjoyable. So I suggest that whoever you are, whatever stage of life you're at, always have the mindset of, I could learn something new today. Never act like a know-it-all, never feel like you're too old or too experienced not to learn something new, because learning is such an important part of life and makes life a lot more enjoyable. Now, this is easy for me to say. I'm a placement student. I basically knew nothing at the start of the year and I've learned so much, but I think it's a value I want to carry on throughout my career, of constantly being able to learn new things every single day. That was long. I've been filming for about half an hour now. I'm so sorry that took forever. If you are still here, then well done to you. I do appreciate it that you've stuck with me this long. This is more of an impactful video because, yeah, when I first started out YouTube, I was always planning on making this video. What did I learn from my placement? So this is kind of a big video for me. So thank you so much for watching if you did make it this far. If you want to see any of my videos I did with other placement students, I interview a bunch of other placement students about their roles to help you understand what other roles there are available to you if you're applying. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video, which will be a bit shorter hopefully.